As we've mentioned here already, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin seems to be running the infrastructure package budget process, already rejecting a 28% corporate tax, and has said current infrastructure bill won't stand as far as he is concerned.
Joining us now to talk about Manchin's holdovers, colleagues in the process, Democratic strategist, owner of JC Strategies, Jennifer Holsworth-Karp, and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard. Let me start with you, Jen. I mean, Joe Manchin loves being at the center. He makes it very clear here. He's like, it all depends on me. Nothing's passing without my vote. And he's making very clear here about what changes he wants to see within the bill. Do you think this is a serious flex? What is he actually trying to get done? Is it a ploy for money, or is he actually just viscerally upset at the idea of raising the corporate tax rate?
As I often love to say on this show, Joe Manchin has never cast the deciding vote on a Democratic issue in his career. So I think it's a little bit of a flex. I think that he's looking for something. And as usual, we're sort of focused on the wrong issue. 25%, 28%. Obviously, I completely support raising the effective tax rate on corporations. What is that going to get us? Very little until we close the loopholes and close the get-arounds. The reason why Amazon is allowed to pay $0 in taxes is not because the effective tax rate is 3% higher or lower. It's because they are able to take complete advantage of the tax code in order to pay no taxes. That's what we should be focused on. And that's what I think Senator Manchin should be saying if he's really interested in helping out on this bill. But instead, once again, we're focused on the wrong issue here as a party and as a nation in general.
Yeah, Rachel, I think that's actually a really good point. Can you pick up on that from the sort of policy substance? Because the other piece that Janet Yellen has been talking about in particular is this global minimum tax, which may actually be more impactful than upping the corporate tax rate. Like Jennifer, obviously I support raising it to 28% or even higher, back to the 35% where it used to be. But as she points out, it's really the loopholes that are the ballgame here. So take us through the policy substance.
I think the loopholes are what everybody should be trying to get at. And what's interesting to me is that after this last week, with corporations sort of aggressing against Republican states, I'm actually curious if you're going to see a number of Republicans come over and support this. Now, I think the issue they always have is that it's this issue, in the midst of a bunch of woke policies that they don't support and they can't get behind it. But I think you're going to see a number of Republicans not feel very much sympathy for a lot of these corporations right now. And that's what I'm very interested in focusing on, because this, again, they've been spent 30 years defending these corporations only to be smacked around by them. And so kind of there's decision time for the Republicans on this issue.
Let me follow up on that, Rachel. I see Mitch McConnell out here being like, corporations should stay out of politics, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I haven't seen that. Haven't heard
that's
that.
Convenient.
That sure seems awful convenient at this time. And I've been kind of ridiculing it, to be honest, because look, let's be honest. I mean, the guy's seems to go to Matt for the corporate tax rate. I mean, and openly said so in the beginning. So that's my question to you. Will this actually translate into policy? And like you said, look, there will always be the excuse of, well, we can't support this like single provision, so we're not, voting for this, et cetera. But I'm really doubtful to actually see anybody come out on the corporate tax rate. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I said as much to Politico this weekend because I kind of agree with that. It's a lot of rhetoric, and Mitch McConnell is never going to do anything but rhetoric. But what I like about this moment is that it really puts Republicans on notice a little bit. Like, their voters aren't going to stand for this, in putting these corporations first, corporation first policy forever and ever and ever. It's getting more difficult. And that, from where I sit, is a good thing, because I do think you are going to see some younger senators, at least younger politicians, come out and say, no more of this. If you're going to play dumb political games, you're going to win dumb political prizes, and you can't just line up at the trough anymore and expect us to support you. That is not going to come from a Mitch McConnell, but I do think it puts Republicans in a little bit of a position they haven't been in a while.
Jen, let me ask you this. So, look, there's some good things that have been proposed in this infrastructure package, but it's not only a lot smaller than what, say, AOC and the progressives want. They want something more like 10 or 11 trillion over a decade. It's also actually a lot smaller than what Biden proposed on the campaign trail. Estimates of his plans that he ran on were more like 7 trillion for infrastructure. And then you have this dynamic of, immediately when it comes out, you got people like Manchin who want to water it down. So what do you make of the tactic here? And also, why is it always that the package ends up being worse? Why are the negotiations only from the right-wing Democrats who are willing to go so hard in defense of things that are both bad and unpopular?
Well, first, I'm very heartened to hear that Republican senators are going to stop treating corporations as people. But having said that,
we'll wait. We'll not hold our breath
on
that.
I'll
hold my breath.
Finance debate here. But first, what I'm hearing is that this is not the last of the infrastructure packages. From what I understand, it's been broken down into how they can sell it to the American people. We have to remember that even though Joe Biden won, and he won commandingly, there are a lot of numbers out there that say more than 65% of voters actually supported some of Donald Trump's policies, right? So this isn't as much negotiating with the right wing of the Democratic Party as it is selling this to America in order to maintain the high level of support that he is seeing so that he can continue to get legislative victories. We obviously saw the American Rescue Plan be wildly popular, and there was a reason for that. It was sold in the appropriate way, so much so that we saw Republicans who voted against it actually take credit for some of its provisions in their districts. And I think you're going to see the same thing with the infrastructure package. If it's broken down into manageable pieces that are understood by the American public and they see how it's going to help them, obviously you probably saw Mayor Pete do huge rounds over the weekends on the weekend shows saying, look, infrastructure is not just roads and bridges. Infrastructure is broadband. Infrastructure is the power grid. Infrastructure covers numerous things in the United States of America right now that have been neglected, not just under previous Republican administrations, but previous Democratic administrations. And we need to start to address that. Whether it's 2 trillion or 10 trillion right at this moment, I don't think is as important as what is actually included at the end of the day in the bill. And I think each time you see one of these infrastructure packages be passed, the tally is going to wind up being higher and higher. Obviously, it's up to me. I would just say print the money. We need it as a nation in order to be competitive and to remain a first world country and a world leader. But the way things are right now, you need to break it down into manageable pieces, and that's what the administration is doing.
Interesting. I will say, I think Secretary Pete supersedes Mayor Pete in terms of titles, but yeah, who knows? All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Stick with us, ladies. More Team Rising for you after this.